And I know, Suzanne, God put these words in my mind. I said to him, I don't think I'm supposed to make bread for the world. I think I'm supposed to teach the world to make bread for themselves.
Yeah.
And my world at that point was 4 people. 4 people had asked me where they could get a grain mill and would I teach them how to make bread. So that
Okay.
was my world, 4 people. And Bread Beckers was born that day in 1992 on my driveway. And out of our tiny little home with 6 children. And we clipped along with teaching. We started our business and named it Bread Beckers. And I began teaching people and having classes in my house.
From the Florida Parent Educators Association, home of the largest homeschool convention in America, this is the Not by the Book podcast. I'm your host, FPEA Chairman Suzanne Nunn, and together we will hear from guests who share their journey to who and where they are today. Each one of them at some point left the expected path, ripped the page out of the book that says, you have to do it like this, and made their own way. I hope these conversations inspire you as much as they do me. Today's chat is with Sue Becker, co-owner of the Bread Beckers and founder of the ministry Real Bread Outreach. If this is your first time hearing Sue, prepare to be blown away by the vast wealth of knowledge this amazing lady carries around in her head. You will certainly be inspired and challenged to go eat some real bread. Listen with me now.
Well, as a little girl, I was born and raised in Savannah, Georgia. I was the youngest of 4 girls until my younger brother was born when I was 7 years old. So I was the baby till he messed everything up. But I love him dearly. But graduated from high school in Savannah, Georgia, headed off many years ago. Many years ago. But I headed off as a young girl. Like I said, I loved life. I loved the Lord. I came to know Jesus at a young age. Can't really even pinpoint a day. I tell people I've just always loved the Lord and loved going to church, loved everything about that, and was very active in church. But then, like I said, graduated from high school more than 50 years ago now, a long time ago.
Necessary.
I headed off to the University of Georgia as a pre-med student. I loved the body. I loved studying everything about the body, physiology, biology, biochemistry. Those were my favorite subjects, and you think I want to save the world, that's what you think doctors do.
Right.
And so got to Georgia and was like, I don't think I really want to be in school that long. Don't really want that grueling a career. I knew I wanted to be a stay-at-home wife and mother. That was just what I wanted to do. But I did love loved studying the body and helping people and serving people. Changed my major once I got to Georgia to pharmacy, was accepted into pharmacy school, spent 1 quarter in pharmacy school and went, I don't think that's what I want to do either. By then I'm a junior in college. And so the dean of pharmacy school actually led me to food science. And it was an up-and-coming industry in the 70s, and it was a broad, wide-open field, so I was able to, all my credits transferred, and I was able to focus more on microbiology. So I graduated from the University of Georgia as a food science, with a food science degree, focusing mostly on food microbiology. After graduation, I worked for Kraft Foods for almost 5 years as a bacteriologist there until I had my first child. I met my husband, Brad, at the University of Georgia, which is a whole God story. I could tell you that.
Well, tell us a little bit about that, because he's been significantly integral to your work.
Yes, he has. So anyway, just funny story. Brad was a gymnast in high school and wanted very, very much to go to Georgia Southern University. They had a great coach there, and but he didn't get a scholarship there. He got a scholarship to the University of Georgia in gymnastics. Well, here I am in Savannah. We don't know each other now. This is 2 worlds apart. I feel like Peter and Cornelius, worlds apart. I'm sitting down talking to my dad one day, and all of my friends were going to Georgia Southern because it's right next door, to Savannah. It's close. And all my friends from high school were going to Georgia Southern, or a lot of them were. And so I told my dad, I said, I want to go to Georgia Southern. And my dad just looked at me that day and he said, don't go to Georgia Southern. He said, go to the University of Georgia and try out for cheerleading. That was funny. Because I was a cheerleader in high school. So right in that instant, I was like, yep, everything changed. I mean, it was like instantaneous. He didn't have to talk to me, and he didn't really love that I was a cheerleader. So for him to tell me to try out for cheerleading at the University of Georgia. So interestingly enough, the gymnasts at the University of Georgia were the male cheerleaders in that day. So that's
funny.
how I met Brad. He was going to go to Georgia Southern, didn't get a scholarship. I wanted to go to Georgia Southern. My dad changed my mind, and we ended up at the University of Georgia. I call that a real God thing.
Yes.
So that's how we met
And
through
cheering
cheerleading
together.
tryouts. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So anyway, I never made the cheerleading squad. I always made it down to the 10, but never made the final 6. But that's God had another purpose and that was to meet my husband there.
Yeah, and it served its purpose. It was great. That's fantastic. A great story, truly.
Yeah. My freshman year we met, but then we married, and we were married at our senior year.
Okay.
And so this year we will celebrate 50 years of marriage. So
that's an amazing, accomplishment, honestly, and your family.
And I certainly did become a mother. We have 9 children.
Yeah.
And 7 biological, 2 we adopted from Latvia. Later in life, we adopted 2 teenage boys, actually. And we are waiting any day now for our 19th grandchild to be born. And this summer, we will have our first great-grandchild. So we have certainly accomplished that. But God has blessed us so very much. We're very thankful.
Your family is amazing. And I look at what you've accomplished while raising this family, actually, and I would love to step back for a minute and just talk a little bit about the food science interests that you had and working. I know you said you went and worked with Kraft for a few years. I was going to ask, it was a fairly new degree and field. I wasn't really sure what it was that you were planning on doing with that.
Yeah.
So what did a food science major do in corporate industry?
It really is and was and still is a wide open field. Like I said, it's the study of food processing, which is kind of funny.
Interesting.
So you could go into, like, I took courses in food microbiology, food technology, food chemistry, even took meat packing, meat cutting, processing classes. I took a fermentation, a dairy science class. So that's what I'm saying. It was a broad field.
Okay.
The study of preventing and food poisoning and safe food handling and all of that. So, like I said, I focused, though, mostly on food microbiology, but you could easily have been, if I wanted to have gone more career, I could have moved up the ladder to quality control supervisor, product development, research and development, R&D. I know my last year that I worked, I was offered a job at Frito-Lay as in research and development. So there's lots of fields you can go into.
Yeah.
It's still a really wide open
Still
industry.
pretty wide open. Okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And then, of course, I was introduced to you years ago at one of our conventions. So I just remember at that point hearing your story and your probably the original CD that you had out and it would just being amazed by it. So if we could, because I know you became a mom and probably had 5 or 6 kids. What I find funny, and I remember this when I heard you speak and I remember hearing it, is thinking that you enjoyed reading medical journal type things.
I still do.
I thought, that is not me. No, not me.
That's what I tell people.
Yeah, especially with small children running around. It's like, that's not light work at all. But can you kind of back up and tell us where you kind of begin with this? Because I think that is one of the, kind of incredible parts of this story.
Yeah.
And how you took what you learned and moved forward.
Yeah, I laugh and I tell people my coffee table books are not the typical. and going to homeschool shows, it was always exciting. I bought for myself physiology coloring books, nutrition books, all those things. So after graduating college, I loved biochemistry and physiology, and I still do. And so I kept my books and I would study those. And after graduating, I laugh and I tell people I think I'm a much better student after I finished college and high school school than I ever was in school because I just love to study now on my own. But in the
Right.
70s, I got turned on to books by Adele Davis. She was a really popular biochemist, wrote a lot of Let's Eat Right to Keep Fit, Let's Have Healthy Children. I can't remember. She wrote 2 or 3 books, and she was a biochemist. And I found them somehow, some way in my quest to eat healthy. And I loved her books. She focused more on individual nutrients and what they do in your body. And I still glean a lot of information from her books. And so that just got my interest of eating real food, of eating healthy and doing the best things for my family. And I kind of came at everything from the standpoint, if something's not working in my body, if I have an issue, then I would kind of go to her books and go, what nutrient fixes this? What nutrients
Right.
not fixes it, but what nutrient does my body need
Mm-hmm.
that would help this situation? And that's a little oversimplification maybe, but that was kind of my jumping off place. And I liken it to, if your car sputters and quits running and you coast off to the side of the road, the first thing you look at is your gas gauge.
Right.
So
Right.
that's the way it was for me. The first thing I was looking at was my gas gauge, my physical gas gauge. What food, what nutrient is it asking for? Because symptoms are indications that our body's missing something.
Right.
So that was kind of the way I came at things. And I studied her books and read her books. And of course, Let's Have Healthy Children. When I started having children, that was another one of her books that I read. So I believed in eating real food. And I grew up Southern. My mother was a good cook. We never ate out, we never
Right.
ate packaged stuff. And when Brad and I were first married, we had a garden, we grew vegetables, I cooked real food. And
Mm-hmm.
in Adele Davis's book, of course, I read whole wheat flour was the best and healthiest. And so I would buy whole wheat flour from the store and I would go, but it was terrible. It was real dry and gritty. And so I had to put white flour in there to make a soft loaf of bread. And the pancakes are like dense and just
Mm.
not good at all.
Right.
So I kind of gave up on that going, this isn't really working. So I would buy the best bread that I knew from the store. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, then I made our cookies and things from scratch, but I pretty much used just commercial white flour. I'd get unbleached, thinking that was
Right.
the best. And sometimes I would add bean flour to my,
Mm-hmm.
to increase the protein anyway, because those things Adele Davis talked about. But anyway, but I just clipped along thinking I was doing great for my family, which we were probably. We didn't have junky food in the cabinets. We ate real meat, real vegetables. A lot of our vegetables grew from the garden,
Right.
except for our bread,
The
except for our
bread.
bread. So in 1991, I had subscribed to a medical publication. It was actually a Christian publication, and it was a subscription. And so the first journal that came into our home was entitled How to Greatly Reduce the Risk of Common Diseases. In
Hmm.
that journal, the history of white flour was presented, and then a short discussion of the common diseases that plague America: constipation, diverticulitis, hiatal hernia, varicose veins, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, obesity,
Right.
all those. Just a short little brief paragraph on how they're directly related to our consumption of the commercially processed white bread and any commercially processed bread that we're all consuming from the grocery store. And so when I read this, it was like lights went off. I mean, it was like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
how come I didn't know this? How come I didn't put this piece of the puzzle together to see that some of the physical issues that I was dealing with, we weren't a real sickly family, but I was
Right.
constipated. I was chronic sinus congestion.
Mm-hmm.
I had strep throat at least twice a year, maybe even more. My kids had their share of ear infections. We were not as sickly as a lot of families around us,
Right.
but
Right.
we definitely had those issues. So when I read this journal, I learned that grains are the most nutrient dense food God has given us.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned, though, that only when they're eaten whole and intact, like boiling grains and eating them, or the flour's freshly milled, do they retain all of their vital nutrients. Left whole and intact, grains are storable.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned that prior to the 1900s, most of the bread consumed in this country was The flour was milled at home or bought from the local miller. Communities
Mm-hmm.
were built up around the local mills, and people made their own bread at home. And I learned that since the 1900s, that when the steel rolling mills came on the scene that began to sift the bran and germ portions away to produce a non-spoiling,
Right.
long-lasting white flour, the health of our families began to drastically decline in America. And
Mm.
this was very eye-opening information for me when, as a food scientist, when I read on a commercial bag of flour or a bread or a muffin or whatever that you would buy in the store, cake mix, when it said enriched, when I read that word enriched,
Mm-hmm.
I thought, us food scientists, we are doing y'all such a favor. We're making this better than it would have been had we not intervened. And I learned that is not the case at all. For the 35 to 40, 45, who knows how many nutrients are lost
Mm.
when they take the bran and germ away and they take that wheat germ oil away. We lose 35, 40, 45, I don't know, all
Right.
these nutrients that some they haven't even identified yet. It's not a favor, that enriching that they're doing
Yeah.
for us. It's not at all. They replace only 5 now today. Started out in 1948, they only replaced 4, 3 B
Mm.
vitamins and iron for the multitude that are lost. And then today in 1998, it was mandated that the folic acid be
Mm.
added back after watching the rising incidence of neural tube birth defects. So
It's crazy.
this was really, really eye-opening information to me, and that shortly after and they started milling and separating the bran and germ away so that the flour wouldn't spoil, so that it
Right.
would sit on the shelf forever and ever. So with this invention of the steel rolling mills that would take the bran and germ and the oil out and leave only protein and starch. That's what the white flour portion is.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's protein and starches that our bodies need, but God never intended us to eat it without the vitamins, the minerals,
Right.
and the fiber. That's a big thing that we lost as well, the fiber.
Mm.
So not only did we lose lots of nutrients, but we lost fiber to keep our guts moving
Right.
and
Right.
keep the food moving along. So when I read this information, like I said, it was life-changing for me, and it all made biblical sense as
Mm-hmm.
well as scientific sense. And I learned too that when the steel rolling mills came on the scene in the early 1900s and we lost our sources, our most predominant food source of the critical B vitamins, 3 diseases became epidemic at the time.
Mm.
Because now, this was fascinating to me the more I've studied and put the pieces together, and I tell people, you'll never read this in a history book.
Right.
But when the steel rolling mills came on the scene and started producing this long-lasting white flour, it was considered a wonderful discovery. But I always quote this scripture, Proverbs 4:12, I think it is, says, "There's a way that seems right to a man, but the end
Mm.
thereof is death." That is absolutely true. It's a wonderful discovery, but what they weren't expecting, that now, for the first time in history, white bread, white flour is now available for rich and poor alike. Up
Mm.
until this point, white bread was reserved in ancient days for the wealthy, for the royalty, for the kings. They had servants. They could expend the money to hire bakers to
Yeah.
sift the bran and germ portion away to make them softer, fluffier bread. In fact, in the
Mm.
days of the Roman Empire, how dark your bread was or how white your bread was an indication of your social status.
Interesting.
But yeah, I find it fascinating. It was called peasant bread or dirty bread of the poor
Yeah.
people because their bread was dark and brown. And I think it's funny now that we pay extra to get that
To get
peasant
that.
bread back,
Yeah.
But this was something that happened when those steel rolling mills came on the scene, started making white flour, now available to everybody.
Mm.
Rich and poor alike, 3 diseases became epidemic at the time. Beriberi, which is a vitamin B1 deficiency, results in nervous disorders.
Mm.
Pellagra is a vitamin B3 deficiency. It's known as the disease of the 4 Ds. Dermatitis, it was characterized by just severe skin eruptions like oozing, burning sores. Dysentery, a lot of GI disturbances. Dementia, a lot of mental
Interesting.
insanity. And what really caught my attention is it said that Georgia and South Carolina were particularly plagued by pellagra, and that's a vitamin B3 deficiency. I don't know if I said that. That's niacin. First case of pellagra was diagnosed here in Atlanta, Georgia. I believe it was 1902. I can't remember, but anyway, 30,000 cases in one year, and they're like, "What is this?"
That's crazy.
Then anemia. They began to see more and more and more anemia. Puzzled health officials all over our country people were seeing this and going, what in the world has happened? Eventually, they trace it to the B vitamins that we were no longer getting in our most predominant food source, bread,
Bread.
grains. And so the health officials urged the millers to put the Brandon germ back in the flour. By this point, no, the millers, the steel rolling mills had displaced the local millers, the stone mills that, were
Mm-hmm.
around. And they had all gone out of business. So this was the way it was. They're like, no, we can't put it back in there. We're not willing to give up the very lucrative market that we have found for this. I love this, the food industry. The byproducts of the milling process were being
Wow.
sold to the cattle feed industry to make animal feed, which is still done today.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly enough. So they said, no way. And it would take until 1948 for the government to step in and mandate that they enrich the flour. And like I said earlier, for the 35 to 40, maybe more, who knows how many nutrients and fiber are lost when they take the Brandon germ portions out. They only put 4 back in. They were only mandated to put 4 back in. It would take until 1998 for the government to mandate that they enrich it with folic acid, which
That's crazy.
I have to pause there for a moment
Mm-hmm.
and make people understand that enriching process, like I said, is not a favor that the food industry is doing for us. They replace a mere fraction of the nutrients that are lost when they take the Brandon germ away. And it's also synthetic vitamins and iron, and which has created a whole host of other issues. And one of the things I remember that caught my eye in Adele Davis's book is she would a lot of times do studies on the individual B vitamins. And vitamin B1, which is thiamine, which my podcast this week, Sue's Healthy Minutes, is on the B vitamins that are lost when we take the Brandon germ out. And but one of the things Adele Davis pointed out is B1 is so important for emotional stability, and that's, they've seen that it's neurologically important. And so very good for depression and things like that. So she had a client that was struggling with these things. So she started supplementing with B1, isolated B1. What she discovered, you take B1 away from the whole complex of the rest of the B complex family, and you start supplementing with that one. She felt great for 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden it caused a deficiency in all of the other B vitamins. Yeah. So it's very dangerous to take 1, 2, or even 3 away from the family of maybe 17. The B complex typically appears together in food because they work synergistically. And grains are one of our richest food sources of these very, very needed B vitamins. I kind of went off on a tangent there, but it's really on my mind this week. So pellagra, and then of course iron. But it's sad that they watched the rising incidence of birth defects, neural tube birth defects, spina bifida, for 50 years before they went, better put the folic acid back in. Again, synthetic. Now, that has created a whole nother issue that people are just now finding out that they have a gene mutation called MTHFR. They can't break down the fake folic acid, the synthetic folic acid. So it's causing very significant health issues, but what people are excited about that have this gene mutation, they can eat the real folate that is found in whole grains. So, but they cannot eat the enriched, bread products.
Well, and I think it's just, it's a wealth of knowledge. It's a little, when you're not accustomed to breaking down this kind of information and connecting the dots, right? When you listen, even when you listen to someone like you break it down so well and then make those connections, you're still kind of sitting there with like, so what do I do about it? And I know when you first gathered all of this information and the light bulbs went off, that you must have been thinking the same thing. Like, so now what do I do about it? So what were your steps forward, then for you and your family at that point? You had to do something, right?
Yeah. Well, that's right. Just like all those years, I had read whole wheat flour is better. So I was buying whole wheat flour from the store and not noticing any difference because I didn't know whole wheat flour, commercial whole wheat flour is made on those same steel rolling mills that
Right.
separates the bran and germ away. They put some back in, but they don't put the oils in. We've lost our vitamin E, blah, 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 all those things.
All the things.
So in that publication, not only did I learn all those things about wheat and grains and the common diseases and how they're directly related to our consumption of commercially processed bread, but in that same publication introduced me to the concept of milling my own grain at home to make my bread. And that's what blew me away. I was like, you're kidding me. There's a possibility I can do this at home. It introduced me to a small in-home flour mill that sits on my counter. And I was convinced. I'm like, light bulbs went off and I'm like, I want a mill. I want a mill. And so my husband, Brad, bought me a mill for my birthday. And in February of 1991, if you can believe that, 34 years ago.
Yeah.
And it has literally changed our life. And so that's what I tell people. I have never seen one health change. I've done a lot, over the years, but I have never seen one change in our diet bring such significant, noticeable health benefits and to our family. And that I am still as passionate today, 34 years later, as I was when I began. And I always tell people, how many things, maybe you even made a New Year's resolution this year that you were going to do this or do that, how many are you still doing? And it's April, I am still as excited today as I was 34 years ago when I first started. So that was the big change. I had studied, I had read, but when I learned that there was the idea of milling grains at home, because what I also learned in that publication that grains are storable if they're left whole and intact, but once they're milled into flour, oxidation begins and they begin to lose nutritional value and actually begin to spoil, whether you taste it or know it or not, but you're losing nutritional value. So we bought a grain mill. And man, when that grain mill came and I had some wheat at home, I found some from a group of homeschoolers, and I milled my flour and I made my bread, and it was the most delicious bread that I had ever tasted. And what's really funny is I thought this whole wheat flour was going to taste like the flour that I was buying from the store. I literally did. I thought the bread's going to be gross, but I don't care. I'm absolutely convinced if we have to choke it down, we're going to eat it,
Right.
To my shock, that bread was soft, it was fluffy, it was delicious. My kids loved it. By this point I had 5 young children at the time when we started. And I ate that bread, and I tell people, that mill came, I milled flour, I made bread, I ate bread, and I pooped the next morning, and it was like, what happened? What has happened? Because I had struggled with constipation all my life. Didn't really care when I was younger, but when you get older, you start going, this isn't really right. And I had tried natural things. I knew I did not want to take laxatives necessarily. So I had tried natural things. They worked if I did it, but they were outside of my normal eating. It was this, take this, take that. And now all I had to do was eat the bread, and it was done. And so I laugh. I tell people, I know y'all signed on to hear me say I've not been constipated since 1991, which is glorious. And people struggle with that.
Yeah.
Or they say, oh, I have the other problem. They have chronic diarrhea. And I've learned it fixes both. So that was exciting. I began right away to notice I had more energy. I was a homeschooling mom, a stay-at-home mom, 5 young children. I had 3 were born in 3 years.
Oh, wow. Busy.
18. Yeah. The last, those. Yeah. So I was busy, had nursing baby, and
which is
you
also
notice when you have more energy.
Yeah. I was going to say it's encouraging too, though, because even in that situation in your personal life, you were doing the bread. And a lot of people feel like it's something that's not doable because it's too much or whatever, too much work.
Yeah.
But you did that. And so you did it, and it was great for your family. And I know you noticed some other health benefits. I know some of the things that you saw it change, like with warts and things. And I think that you started talking to other people about it. But I was going to ask you, like, at that point in time, were you an anomaly in your group of friends and people? Were you the only one milling flour and, baking your bread like that? Or was it kind of like it is, there's
Yeah.
small sections of the, community that were.
Yeah, I did have some friends that had a grain mill, but I don't think any of them jumped in quite like I did because I
Mhm.
had the background that knew exactly what I was doing, and why. I'm a kind of all or nothing kind of person. Like I said, I
Mhm.
was like, "We're gonna choke this down. I don't care.
Yeah.
We're gonna eat this. We're eating this." And I introduced the bread at every meal, and I white flour has not been in my home since 1991. So
Mm.
that's I talk to people, oh, they mill sometimes, maybe they don't, whenever they
Right.
that was not for me. This is a way of life for me. So yeah, I guess I was a little bit of anomaly and
Yeah.
but I would bake bread for people because I was excited about it. I would share it, when I would go to a church function or a potluck or whatever, I would take bread because I didn't
Mhm.
wanna eat, white
What was
bread, and I
there?
wanted to
Yeah.
share the good bread. And, the next thing I knew, I would send leftovers home with people, and they would start telling me that they noticed a health difference. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I guess I was a little different, though like I said, I did have friends that had bought a grain mill, but for me, it was definitely, "This is the way we're going to live." And, I remember in the early days when I would take things places like coffee cake or muffins, people
Mhm.
go, "Oh my gosh, Sue, these are so delicious. Can I have your recipe?" And I would like, "Sure, I'll share my recipe with you, but you need to understand I mill my own flour and make my own bread." And it was always so funny to me. 2 questions they would always ask. Number 1, they would go first question would be, "You do what?" And I'm like, I mill my own flour to make my bread. The second question I always thought was funny until I really studied grain mills and how they've evolved over the years. They would always go, "Where do you live?" And I was like, "Why does that matter?" And I think they were picturing a barn or a
Right,
a
right.
grist mill, that maybe I lived
Yeah.
by the river, and maybe an ox in my barn. Maybe I was the one treading it out, and I'm like, "No, no, no. I live in a 1,300 square foot house. My kitchen is this big, but my little grain mill sits on my counter. It's not in a barn. You don't need a
Okay.
barn. You just need the right tools." And that's what
Mhm.
I encourage people. So, yeah, I guess I was a little bit of a
A little bit of an
of a
anomaly.
yes, yes, yes. But the interesting thing is, as I made bread for people, people started calling me with health benefits
Mhm.
outside of mine. I mean, I had constipation gone, energy levels boosted, my sinus congestion went completely away in the first month. I lived on antihistamines prior to that, and I thought it was
Yeah.
just the way I was born, living
Mhm.
in Savannah with
I
all
was
the
gonna say, and
yeah.
South Georgia, yeah.
And South Georgia,
Yeah.
yeah, and, I can tell people I have not had an antihistamine or a decongestant of any kind since 1991. That is huge. Kids today
Mm.
are living on them. So, as I shared my stories, I had my testimonies, and my headaches went away, sugar cravings went away, my children's health, our family just seemed to be healthier. We didn't catch every bug that went around. No more ear infections.
Mm.
My children's warts went away.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother story. It's a virus, and their immune
Mhm.
system fought that virus, and the warts went away with bread. We have hundreds of wart stories. But anyway, so as I shared with others and baked bread for others, people started calling me and
Mm.
asking me, of course, if you ever give bread to somebody that you've made yourself, they're, "Will you
The
make bread for me? I'll buy it. I'll pay
Oh,
for you."
yeah.
So next thing I know, I was making bread for my family and making bread for everyone, a lot of people in the neighborhood, and people started calling me. One lady I'll never forget called me before 8 o'clock in the morning and said, and that's where we get the slogan, "It's the bread, it's gotta be the bread." And I'm like, "Who is this?" And she told me, and she said, "It's the bread." She goes, "My cholesterol dropped 85 points in a month, and all I've changed is the bread." I always laugh to this day, her favorite thing, and she said her favorite thing that I made for her, and she was an older lady, and I was making bread for her,
Mm.
and, her favorite thing was cinnamon rolls with cream cheese icing. Yeah, ate one after every meal, she told me, and she said, "I
That is
know
something.
it's the bread, it's the only change I've made. 3 years they've been trying to get my cholesterol down with medication, multiple doctors," and she said, "This is the only thing I've changed. It has to be the bread."
Mhm.
Well, so what did Sue do? I pull out my biochemistry books and like, what in the world could be in this bread that would do this? I
Mhm.
found everything's there, and that heart
So
disease and high cholesterol was not an issue until white bread came on the scene for everybody. And now
That's
we're yeah,
incredible.
but inositol, choline, lecithin, vitamin B6, vitamin E, it's all in whole grains, predominant food source. So
Mm,
that's what was bringing her cholesterol down. And so the next thing you know, I'm hearing more and more testimonies. Somebody, anemia all her life, changed to the bread, no longer. In 6 months, no longer anemic. A
mm,
lady I just recently interviewed, well, sometime last year, iron transfusions, horrible to get. They're very painful. In
right.
just a few months on the bread, and all her life, this has been a problem,
Mm,
and we see this all the time. Diverticulitis healed, irritable bowel gone in 2 weeks from the fiber. People losing weight.
yeah.
Bread doesn't make you fat. That's a misnomer.
Yeah.
Um, the
Not real
commercially
bread.
processed stuff,
Yeah.
yes, but
Not the
not
real
real bread.
bread.
So these are the things that I saw and I learned, and then so I'm just clipping along, making this for my family and for other people. But honestly, I got weary of trying to
Mhm.
make bread for my whole family and people knocking at my door all day, making bread for them in our tiny
Right.
home, homeschooling my children. By then, I'd had my sixth child,
Yeah.
fall of 1992. I had been making bread all day and I was actually quite tired
Mm.
and weary. And I'll never forget, Brad was still in the construction industry and he drove home from work. And I met him in the driveway and sat down on the porch swing, on the carport swing. And I just looked at him and I said, and I know, Suzanne, God put these words in my mind.
Mhm.
I said to him, I don't think I'm supposed to make bread for the world. I think I'm supposed to teach the world to make bread for themselves.
Yeah.
And my world at that point was 4 people. 4 people had asked me where they could get a grain mill and would I teach them how to make bread. So that
Okay.
was my world, 4 people.
Mm.
And Bread Beckers was born that day in 1992 on my driveway and, out of our tiny little home with 6 children. And we clipped along with, teaching. We started our business and named it Bread Beckers, and
You
I
should
began teaching people and having classes in my house.
That's great. You
Yeah.
should tell us a little bit about what you found out about your name, though. I always thought that was an interesting part of your story.
Yeah.
You
Well,
were
it was kind
destined.
of yeah, it was kind of funny because when I started making bread for church functions and community functions, I had a real good friend, and she came up to Brad one day and she said, "Your name might be Brad Becker, but that is Mrs. Bread Becker over there." And so she kind of brought that up. And so when I said to Brad that day, and he said, "Well, what would you want to call the business?" I said, "I think Bread Beckers." And he goes, "I don't know. I don't want to be cute about it." I said, "No, I think Bread Beckers." Well, it was a short time after we had gotten the name and started our business, we learned that Brad's family is German
Mhm.
descent. They know who came over from
Oh,
Germany. They
yes.
can trace it back. So very strong. And Becker in Germany is, we always learned it was the name for the baker. It was
Mhm.
the apprentice bread baker. But a few years ago, we actually met some Germans at a show, a houseware show, and Brad was telling him where his family was from. And he said, in that area, the Becker was known as the one who kept the communal oven clean and hot and ready, because in
Yeah.
those days, people didn't have they weren't going to stoke up their fire in their
In
home
their
to just
home.
bake a loaf of bread. So there were communal ovens. People
Mhm.
would prepare their bread, take it down to the communal oven and bake it. And he kept it hot and clean, and that was the Becker.
And ready to
And
do. That's
that's
so
where that
incredible.
name comes from. And then his mom's name, she comes from a German family as well, and
Mhm.
her maiden name was Bacchus, and that's the Backhouse, the bakehouse.
Oh,
So it was
so
like, well, all righty then. I think we're destined to do
Just
this. And then I laugh thinking about my family. My maiden name is Kennedy, but
Mhm.
my mom was a preacher's kid, a Methodist preacher's kid, and she went to Wesleyan Girls College, and she worked her way through college to earn extra income making biscuits in the cafeteria.
That's
And her mom graduated from Young Harris College here in Georgia. She worked her way through college making biscuits in the cafeteria. So I'm like, okay,
that
we've
was a
come from a
part
long
of
line of
your
bread bakers. But interestingly enough, though, I grew up Southern, and of course, we never had yeast bread.
Yeah.
My mom was a great cook, and we had biscuits or cornbread
Oh, yeah.
because that's culturally what we
Yes.
grew up on. And it was so funny when I learned how to make yeast bread. My mom was so intrigued by that, and I'll never. She was a very Southern genteel lady. She talked like this, and she
Mm.
was just very sweet. And I told her one day, I said she loved my cinnamon rolls, and she loved it when I would bring bread down to her, and she would go. I said, Mama, I can teach you how to do this. And she just looked at me one day and she goes, no, she goes, yeast bread scares me. And I just tell people all the time, you don't have to be scared. If this Southern girl could learn how to do it, so can
So
you.
can
And
you.
with the right tools and the right equipment, it's just a very important part of your life.
Well, and I think that it's interesting to me because, you still hear the same kinds of responses even today, I'm sure, from people. But, trending wise, I would say, like, what did you find was the hardest thing when you first started educating people? Was it getting them to understand the reason why? I mean, were people mainly doing it because it tasted good and it was great? Or was it getting them to understand the why behind it? Or was it getting them to understand the how of doing it and how it needed to be
Yeah.
implemented in their lives?
In the early days, it was definitely the nutritional information, getting
Hmm.
them to understand the why. The taste of it was the icing on the cake,
Right,
so
right,
to
right.
speak. You've seen us
Yeah.
at homeschool shows. Yeah, I go do my lecture, and then you gotta come back to my booth and taste the bread.
Yeah.
But that's it, and, Suzanne, you said you listened to my CD.
Hmm.
That CD was made and recorded, I think, in 1993
Okay.
or 94. Here we are, how many years later?
Hmm.
It's still the same message. You can go on my YouTube, you can go to my podcast. It's still the
Still the
same
same.
information because it's scientifically correct information.
Right.
Nothing's changed. It's not a fad. And so
Hmm.
in the early days, it was teaching the difference between white flour, commercial
Hmm.
white flour, even commercially processed whole wheat flour, and showing them the nutritional loss when you mill the flour and why you need to get all the components and mill it yourself.
Yeah.
So that was the early days. Then it was, oh gosh, there's been so many myths about the battles with whole grains, the
Hmm.
high protein, low carb, why that's dangerous. So I'd have to teach that. And then the whole gluten free and why gluten's bad and wheat is bad and debunking those
The
myths. And
myths.
now the
Yeah.
carnivore and the keto going, oh, you just don't want to do that,
Yeah.
and debunking those myths. But people go, oh, but I lose weight, or they go on the gluten free. Oh, but I feel better. Well, yes, think about it. Those restrictive diets, think about what you're not eating. You're not eating the commercially processed bread from the store.
Right.
But those diets are not sustainable. And eventually, yes, you may see some health benefits in the very beginning, but because you're not giving your body the nutrients that you need,
Hmm.
you're going to eventually start seeing some health degradation, some
Right.
compromises in your health. And what a lot of people don't understand, grains are the most nutrient dense food God has given us. Wheat alone is only missing 4 of the
Hmm.
essential nutrients our body needs for life and health. And that's vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin D, and B12.
Hmm.
So if we go back to Genesis chapter 1, verse 29, God gave us 2 kinds of foods. He gave us plants that bear fruit with the
Hmm.
seed in it. That's all your fruits and vegetables. They're a rich source of what? Vitamin A and vitamin C.
Yeah.
He gave us sunshine. There's our vitamin D. B12 we have to get from animal sources, but then the other type of food he gave us was plants that bear seed for our
Yeah.
food. That's all of your dry grains and beans.
Mm.
And those are storable, those are sustainable. Fruits and vegetables rot and decay over time. God gave us a storable food that we could have when fruits and vegetables weren't available,
Right. Right.
And so it's been a journey, but I always laugh. I'll never forget one day, I don't know if it was at FPA or what homeschool show it was, but I'd done my lecture and it's quite compelling because when I take you through digestion and show you how it's related to constipation, irritable bowel, sinus congestion, hemorrhoids, fissures, just the compromised immune system, compromised
Hmm.
digestion, and show you all this. People see it. But I'll never forget this one lady. She sat through my lecture and she was like, "Oh my goodness." She goes, "But then I just don't know if my family's going to, like this bread." So we go back to the table. And of course, we were always popular with the kids because we're
Oh,
making
yeah.
rolls and pancakes and
Uh-huh.
pizza and blah, just everything. And the kids come and they're eating it, eating it. Well, she followed me back to the table and she's standing there. And this little boy, her son, unbeknownst to me, I didn't know it was her son. She was so worried. She goes, "I just don't know. I want to do this, but I just don't know if they'll eat it." He comes running up to the table and he goes, "Mom, where have you been? I've been looking for you. I want you to taste this. It's amazing." And she just looked at me and she goes, "Okay, I guess I'll get a
That's it.
meal." So, it was funny. And then
That's it.
people, they talk about the expense of it, the
Mhm.
time investment. People say, "I'm just too busy." And I'm like, we're all busy. And I don't think anybody can say they're busier than someone else
Right.
so get the right tools.
Mhm.
Get the tools to make it easy to incorporate in your life. And, so that's important. And then expense, I'll never forget this lady heard me at a homeschool show. Her daughter had over 500 warts on
Wow.
her. She started getting them at 12. They burned them off, had
Mm.
them frozen off. They all came back because it's a virus, and what do you do when you take away the manifestation of the virus? You didn't
Yeah.
treat the virus. So she follows me to my table after hearing my lecture, and interestingly enough, I told my wart story. 2 people in the class tell their wart testimony that they
Yeah.
started this bread, thinking that part was kinda hokey, but their
Mhm.
warts went away. So she follows me back to the table, and she says, "How much is a meal?" And I told her, and she said, "I've paid more than that for one medication to get rid of her warts that didn't work." She goes, "They
Mhm.
now have her on ulcer medication thinking maybe it's stress related."
Mm.
So she said, "We paid more than that for one medication that didn't work. None of us could eat it," and she
Yeah.
said, "I like to cook. We like to eat. We have to
Yeah.
eat. What have I got to lose?"
Mm.
And that lady called 2.5 weeks later. Every one of those child's warts was gone
That's an
because of
incredible story.
the nutrients
Mm.
provided in freshly milled whole grain, protected the integrity of every cell in her body,
Mm.
reduced the risk of viral invasion, and they had tried all kinds of things. So, what's the value of that cost investment, you
Mhm.
know? And
Right.
and I tell people, "How do you wanna spend your money? At the doctor, on medicine, on junk that's actually making you sick?" I think of, in Haggai chapter 1, it was so intriguing to me. It says, well, let me get it right. It says, "Consider your ways and how
Mm.
you have fared. You sow much, but you reap little. You drink, but you never get enough. You clothe yourselves, but no one is warm." The last line really got me. It says, "You earn wages to put it in a bag with holes in it."
Mm.
When I read that, I was like, consider our ways. How have we fared? We're working to earn money, and I forget the proportion that goes towards food of our earnings.
Right.
The bag with holes in it is the stuff we're buying in the store is making us sick.
Mm.
And now we spend the rest of our money on medicine,
Medicine.
chronically ill,
Yeah.
going to the doctor, even if it's sinus congestion and laxatives,
Yeah.
or most commonly prescribed drug now, acid
Oh,
blockers.
yeah.
Antacids, and I'm like, "Ugh," and the heavy use of antibiotics, it is just making us sicker and sicker and sicker.
Mm.
So I'm like, "Listen, in 25 years of raising 9 children, 25 years, my children only needed to go to the doctor for an illness twice." That's
That's
pretty money
incredible.
saving.
That's yeah, quite a
Yeah,
testimony too. And I know that you have had some interesting shifts in our society and culture, and over the years you've seen a lot. I know, like
yeah,
the Y2K
yeah.
moments, COVID,
Oh,
things that
COVID,
have had
yep,
a huge impact on how people look at our systems and our food processing. I think a lot has maybe changed and shifted over the last few years, even, as you watch more and more people become influencers and talk about this.
yeah.
What kind of an impact are you seeing now? And do you think that this shift that we're seeing and this education that we're seeing now is going to stick and take a little
Yes.
bit deeper roots?
Yes, I absolutely do. I'm seeing more and more people are concerned about our medical care system,
Mm-hmm.
just like that mom. They tried everything and all they
Right.
changed was the bread and they get this and that's virus. That's
Mm-hmm.
warts. You
Right.
think, oh, I can live with warts. Of course, you don't understand. You're living with a virus for 5 or 6 years. You would get
Right.
concerned if it was another type of manifestation. But, people are struggling with high cholesterol, anemia, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, all these things. And they are searching. So I'm seeing a real surge. I mean, when we started, it was like we were pioneers.
Yeah.
And then, of course, things like Y2K and COVID were very concerning for people. And it was interesting to me that here we started our business in 1992 in our home.
Mm-hmm.
We outgrew our home by 1998 and incorporated with a longtime friend and partner. And I'm in our current location, 10,000 square foot store and warehouse
Which is
selling grain mills.
amazing.
And
Yeah, I love it.
but 1 week after starting our business, 1 week, God woke me up early one morning and he said to me very clearly that he was raising us up to be like Joseph's, to provide his people with grain when they needed it.
Mm.
And that was pretty profound. And I even wrote in my journal that morning, my prayer journal, he said to me, it will be a tremendous thing.
Mm.
And we clipped along and Y2K hit and we became known as a grain supplier and people were
Yeah.
coming from all over to buy grain from us. We are now one of the largest grain packaging facilities in the southeastern United States. We bring grain in by the semi-truckload and package it down into 6-gallon food grade buckets for retail consumers, the home consumers. And then Brad took that vision very, very much to heart and has developed co-ops all over the country. We have probably 130 to 150 now. He used to personally deliver all the ones in the Southeast. He just now what he calls semi-retired. He no longer is driving the semi, so we're shipping. But why? It's because to get grain in the hands of people as cheaply as we can. It's not cheap to ship at UPS. We do every single day, but having co-ops where we have coordinators in each location and we have them on an ordering schedule. So everybody in that city or that location orders at the same time. We compile it, put it on a pallet and ship it by a truckload. So those are options for people to jump in on if they want to go to breadbeckerscoop.com. But why I'm saying this and sharing this is we've seen Y2K, we saw COVID, which people were terrified, with the shutdown. Then the Ukraine-Russian war, and there was propaganda out there of wheat shortage. America was never really in a wheat shortage. But there's these scares. And though I think the trend now is a healthy one, I still believe that there could come a time when grains might be our only reliable food that we have. Doesn't need to be radiated to be stored, doesn't have to be picked early and ripened. It is storable. It is a storable food. When fruits and vegetables, we don't think too much about famines in our country because we go to the grocery store.
Yeah.
But I think COVID was a wake-up call, and we have to think about these things. Droughts, we've seen some interesting things throughout our business, and we watch farming and things like that. So that's my thought, and that's why we still plug along at what we do and teach people this way of life. Yeah, we sell an electric grain mill, but there may come a day when electricity is an issue, when you have a blackout, with the threat of cyber attacks and things like that. These are things we don't think about. And I'm not a doomsdayer by any means, but wheat is storable. What did God tell Joseph to store? Grain.
Yeah, grain.
And it's storable. And if you don't have the capacity to bake, you can boil it. We can all build a fire and boil grain. I don't want to be too, like I said, sounding so primitive, but it's something we should think about. And
and I do believe, like I said, right now there is more of an awareness in our culture of the some of the skills that have been lost.
Yeah.
Some of the, health benefits that have been compromised.
Yes.
With our dependency on other people to do everything for us, whether it's raising food, processing food, cooking food, whatever it is. And I just think that it's interesting because personally, as I've watched some of these changes, I do feel like some of this is bearing some deeper roots in our culture again. And it makes me happy. It makes me happy to see that for the families who are benefiting and for the children who are being exposed now to things that, there were a couple of generations that lost
Yeah,
even a
absolutely.
conversation about raising your own herb garden or
Yeah,
vegetables or anything. We
yeah.
didn't all have those conversations.
That is definitely one good thing that came out of the COVID. I
Yeah.
think people learned how to make bread, and they were like, "You know what? Maybe I should garden. Maybe I" so,
Mhm.
it wasn't a complete loss or a failure. God
Yeah.
uses everything for good, but I do think there's a trend looking at health
Mhm.
and nutrition, and I think the truth that I'm sharing is so real and it's so practical. And God has just continued to lead me and guide me. And not that I have it all, but it's
Yeah,
it's a
no.
very basic truth that when presented, it doesn't take much for somebody to go, "Oh my goodness." When I share the
Mhm.
information, especially when I take people through digestion, my kids call it mom's poopy talk. But when I take them through that, I just spoke a month ago at a conference, a ladies'
Mhm.
conference, and 2 or 3 people came up and went, "You just described me." And I'm like,
Mhm.
"I just described America,"
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
this is the one change that can bring you back. But also, it's good to be prepared for
Mhm.
times that we may have some difficult times,
Yeah.
but also preparation is not just storing food, it's getting healthy
Mhm.
to endure that. Do you wanna get down here in a time of need and be dependent on medication that you may not be able to get to or,
Right.
and I also tell people, for me, being healthy is not just not being sick. I'm very thankful that I
Right.
don't have strep throat twice a year. I'm very rarely sick. I may come down with something every now and then, but
Mhm.
I get over it. I don't typically need a doctor. But being healthy is not just about not being sick. It is being able to have the energy, the stamina, the lack of drug dependence to go and do what God has called you to do. I mean, I
Right.
wake up each day and I'm like, "God, what do you have for me today?" I wake up some days and like,
Yeah.
I'm tired. I'm 70 now. It's been
Which
that's the
is
big thing for me when
incredible. And I just
uh,
wanna say looking at you, which everyone else that's
oh,
listening to you is not looking at you like I am, but oh my goodness, there's no way you look 70 by any stretch of the imagination. If bread does that, then we all need to eat more bread. And
you're very
then
nice.
say, but
You're
no,
very nice.
but you like I said, the way that you have continued to passionately pursue this and grow this business and educate people who can come behind you
Yeah.
even to continue
Yeah.
educating, it's encouraging. And it is. It's like, as long as we're here on this earth, God's given us something to do, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and we need to be able to get up and do it
Yeah.
and keep
Exactly.
going. So it's
Yeah.
important. It's
It
huge.
is, and, I find bread scriptures everywhere,
Mm,
even like that Haggai, that verse, that said to me, "Consider your ways, how have you fared?" And that's what when I take you through the common diseases that plague America, how have we fared?
yeah.
And it's not very good, and the change really started happening. White flour, white bread was the beginning
Yeah.
of the very ultra processed food. And then, of course, right after we started Bread Beckers and I started studying bread and like I said, when I read my Bible, just my daily reading of bread scripture will just jump out at me. But Isaiah 55 verse 2 was one in the early days. Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread and your earnings for what does not satisfy? And
Mm.
that's not a paraphrase. That's exactly what Isaiah 55 verse 2 says. And I said, "Lord, I didn't know. I didn't know that wasn't bread." And he's kind of like, "Well, now you do."
Now you
And
know.
that's one, but I know we're running short of time here, but this one really touched me when I found it. And I know exactly where I was when I read this scripture, just reading through my daily Bible reading. I go through the Bible every year. So,
Yeah.
Genesis is easy, Exodus is easy, Leviticus, a little tricky, Deuteronomy,
Yeah.
but I'll never forget. I came to Deuteronomy chapter 24 and I'm reading it, and verse 6 just blew me away. In those days, when you borrowed something of value from someone, you were to give them a pledge. A lot of times it was your cloak, or something,
Hmm.
but you were to give them something of value that you needed
Right.
as a promise, as a pledge of I'm going to return what I borrowed from you. I'm going to pay you back or whatever.
Hmm.
Did you know God had a law for what you could not take as a pledge?
Mm.
Deuteronomy 24 verse 6 says this, "Do not take a man's upper millstone, which that's his milling
Yeah.
stone to make bread. Do not take a man's upper millstone as a pledge, for you would be taking his life.
Wow.
That's pretty
That's an
powerful. I
incredible
get chills
verse.
every time I quote it, and I quote it a lot. But
Yeah.
that's what happened in the early 1900s. We let someone take our millstones out of our
Mm.
home, and we've been losing our life and our health ever since.
Yeah.
And
It does give you
it's
chills like that, just
yeah.
realization. Yeah.
Yeah, and Jesus compared himself to bread, and he said,
Mhm.
"I am the real bread of life. He who comes to me shall be satisfied." You know why we're overweight and obese is
Yeah.
because the food we're eating doesn't satisfy us because it's nutritionally deficient. We
Mhm.
crave food because our body's like, "I need B vitamins, I need vitamin C, I need
Right.
calcium, I need these things," and people don't always make that connection. Of course, now the food companies put stuff in there to make you crave it too, but,
Well, and I also like what you mentioned earlier, the synthetics, the things that we're taking. I mean,
yeah,
there are so many people that take so many supplements and so many
yeah.
things and still struggle
Yeah,
with all of the health issues,
yeah,
because our bodies, I mean, you can't even, our bodies aren't even intended to process all of
yeah,
that, right?
yeah,
And,
yeah,
it's the natural food, and so much of our food's been depleted. It's like you said, this grain is an answer to so many of the nutrients that are
yeah.
needed in one thing, just one
One
place.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is the most nutrient-dense food source that God has given us, and
Yeah.
one that is sustainable and
Mhm.
storable. Doesn't lose every day that it hangs on a tree or,
Right.
doesn't lose its nutritional value. And, what a lot of people don't realize is most of the world lives off of grains. They
Mhm.
don't eat the meat like we do. I've gone to Tanzania, I've gone to Haiti, I've gone to Israel, it is beans and rice, corn
Yeah.
and rice, wheat and rice, wheat and vegetables,
Mhm. Mhm.
it's seeds is the predominant. They don't have the money or they just culturally don't eat the meat and the sugar, like we do here in America. Now, a lot of the world has gone our ways and
Right,
they're
right.
suffering from the same, sicknesses that we are, but it's very intriguing,
Mm.
when you look at that and see that around the world. Bread was intended to be the staff of life, the mainstay. When Jesus said, well, he was quoting the Old Testament, man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds forth from the mouth of God. He was basically reiterating to them, "You think just because you have bread, you can live."
Mhm.
So he was underscoring the fact that we can live physically
Mhm.
off of bread. Spiritually, we need the real bread
We
of
need
life,
right.
Jesus Christ. Yeah.
And that's so true. And let me ask you this, because we're gonna wrap up here in a minute, but I wanted to
Okay.
ask you if you want to share anything. Is there anything new happening on the horizon for Bread Beckers project that you might be working on that's interesting that you would want to share with anybody, or that would
Yeah.
excite us?
Well, yeah, as far as Bread Beckers, we're still here.
Yeah.
My podcast, Sue's Healthy Minutes, is
Mhm.
lots of information, a lot of bread testimonies. I have
Yeah.
interview folks it's the bread stories. So I really encourage people, if you want to be encouraged once a week with a new podcast, it's called Sue's Healthy Minutes. You can get it on any podcast platform, or you can go to our website and get it as well.
Right.
We've started co-ops, not just in the southeastern United States, but all over. So if you're interested in that, that's something we are developing. We'll ship it truckload, and we can help
Mhm.
you as if you're interested in being a coordinator or interested in where we already have some. We have a lot in Texas, Missouri now, Ohio, Arkansas, Mississippi,
Yeah.
Tennessee. Not just the Eastern corridor here where my husband
Mhm.
used to drive. So if you want me to come and speak, I can do
You can
that.
do
So you
that.
can send an email to support@breadbeckers.com. Check out our website, breadbeckers.com. And, another thing God put on my heart, I'm so passionate about the health changes, is I did start a ministry called Real Bread Outreach. It's a 501c3 if you want to donate to what we're doing there. We started out in 2007 just ministering locally, helping coming alongside food banks and getting food in the health of mostly the elderly and things like that. But in 2016, God called me to Haiti. We built a bakery there. We're still able to get wheat. It's pretty rough down there. I haven't been able to go down, but I made 15 trips in a matter of a couple of years to
Mm,
train teams of bread bakers. So we have a bakery there that's milling their own flour and making their bread. During
yeah.
COVID, it was one of their predominant foods was they had
Mm,
a bread every day. We built a bakery in Tanzania. We helped establish a baking operation in Israel on the
that's
Mount of
great.
Blessing there, and we helped another ministry just with training. We didn't have to support it financially. She did, but in Uganda, they're feeding refugees from Congo.
Mm,
We're about to help another ministry. Used to be a ministry in Haiti, but they had to flee. They're now in the Dominican, so we may come alongside them and help them build a bakery there for the
fantastic.
refugees fleeing from Haiti.
Right.
So, and we've started a feeding program in Tanzania. We're feeding right now 25 pastors and their families.
Mm,
$25 a month feeds them, gets them a food package of wheat and corn and rice and beans and a food package because they were starving. They go out in the darkest areas in the bush of
mm,
Africa in Tanzania and sharing the gospel. So we found
that's
out that they were starving because they were in poor places and had no way of earning income and they were
wow.
wanting to share the gospel and evangelize. So we started that, and that's an ever-growing ministry, and we're helping start a grain distribution warehouse in Tanzania. So we're doing a lot of amazing things, and that's realbreadoutreach.com. So you can give there as well. But Bread Beckers we're moving. We're just not
Thriving.
moving physically, but
Yeah.
we're doing what I say is we just do the next thing that God
Mm,
calls us to do and fulfilling the need. My passion will continue to be to teach people that bread is the most nutrient dense food source that God has given us. And Jesus
yeah.
compared himself to bread for a reason.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Sue, for your faithfulness in doing it. And just, I mean, it's been a sheer joy just to know you personally for so many years, but to watch the impact that Bread Beckers has had on so many people that I personally know
Mhm.
and the way that you're describing now that obviously you've impacted people across the world. And that's a passion that is driven by something deep inside of you that loves the Lord and loves people. And we appreciate it so much.
Yeah. Well,
Mhm.
that's the funny thing. A few years ago, my friend reminded me of what I said to Brad in 1992 with a customer base of 4. I don't think I'm supposed to make bread for the world. I think
Mm,
I'm supposed to teach the world to make bread for themselves. I had no idea
you
where
had
God
no
would
idea.
take me.
That's it.
I was yeah, and so I will say this as a closing remark.
Mm,
Whatever God's putting on your heart to do today, do it. Even if you think it's very insignificant, do it. You don't know where God will take you 34 years later, so just do it.
I
And
love that.
because I just look back now and I'm like, God, you put those words in my mouth, and I
Mm.
had no idea. I never thought it would even grow into Bread Beckers, what we are
Oh,
today,
yeah.
much less go around the world and teach
Yeah.
people to make
And
bread for themselves.
like those are such wise words of encouragement though, and there's so much truth in that. And I want to just encourage people that might be listening that are in the Atlanta area and near you, if they've not been to your
To our
warehouse and
store.
to your store, to your classes, all of that in person is just amazing
Yeah.
too. So I would
Yeah, I
encourage
tell
anybody to do
everybody.
that.
Yeah, I tell everybody we're the best kept secret in Woodstock. We're in an
Hmm.
industrial park, so if you do look us up and find us, don't be shocked when you turn into an industrial park. But we're here. We're a full-fledged kitchen store. We have a large studio kitchen that can seat 100. We do classes regularly, so come join us for a class. It's hard to get into, so the best way is subscribe to our email newsletter. We send one a month. We won't inundate your inbox with an email every day, but
Yeah.
that way you'll know where I'm speaking because, like, I'm going to Memphis at the end of this month and then North Carolina in May. And so I
Mm,
speak all over. So you'll get our schedule of events and upcoming classes, and
all the
that'll keep
things.
you up to date. Yeah. But come visit our store. Yeah.
That's
It's amazing.
fantastic. Yeah, I plan
Yeah,
on
and
doing it soon.
we sell grain mills, we sell mixers and bread machines and every kind of grain or bean you can imagine,
All the
and we ship
tools. Yeah.
every single day to UPS or through our co-op. So,
That's
yeah.
fantastic. Thanks for listening to the Not by the Book podcast from the Florida Parent Educators Association. To learn more about homeschooling in Florida, or to find resources to help you on this amazing journey, visit our website at FPEA.com. If you have any suggestions for future guests, contact me, Suzanne, at notbythebook@fpea.com. Thanks again for listening, and be inspired to live your life not by the book.